Welcome to Ancient Spiritual Tours podcast, where we are going to speak about everything Ireland, everything ancient, and all the magic that comes with it.
So, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Today we've got a special guest, Mr. Brian Collopy, who's going to talk to us about all things Lough Gur and the Goddess Aine as part of our Beltane pilgrimage. Dee and I will be welcoming people to come and share in the Stone Circle, the Wedge Tomb, and the other fantastic sort of features around the lake of the Lough Gur site. How are you doing, Brian?
Very good, Carl. Thank you very much. Yeah, as I say, it is getting back to normal here now, as we were saying, with the snow and everything. So yeah, it's good. The
Snoring out.
quiet time of year.
We're
Sorry.
defrosting. Yeah.
Exactly, defrosting. Yeah, it's pure mild here now again. It's shocking to think that in the space of a week, if you saw the landscape last week versus this week, you'd think 6 months had passed. You know what I mean? It's incredible. But it's been lovely. It's been lovely, as in it's lovely to see the land like that, to be honest with you, and you see it covered in the snow, and there's actually parts of the landscape you don't normally notice, and then you put snow on top of it, and all of a sudden it looks more prominent. And like obviously even things like the Wedge Tomb and stuff, just yeah, I'd say not that I've too many photos anyway, but I've definitely made another 500 photos over the week.
You can't have too many, right?
Well, this is it. You know what I mean? And sure, look, taking photographs isn't. We're not doing too much damage by taking photographs.
That's true.
I'd say it must have been about, I'd say easily about 20 years ago when I first ended up by the lakeside in Lough Gur.
Sorry, that's my dog, by the way, growling. That's not me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 20 years ago, Carl. Sorry, you were first at the
Yeah,
lake, is it?
I remember
Yeah.
going down there for a picnic one day, long before myself and Dee were down there with our shamanic drums and doing little kind of ceremonies and stuff. And what struck me was the awesome kind of beauty and peacefulness of the place. You grew up near there, so I imagine you can tell us more about how it came to be how it is today.
Yeah, I mean, Lough Gur is funny. So, I mean, from a purely archaeological point of view, it's one of the few places in Ireland where continuous habitation is evidenced there. So, from the time Neolithic farmers arrived nearly 6,000 years ago, people have continuously inhabited the place. And I mean, to me, I suppose there's obviously, as you rightly say, like, I mean, the majority of people, when they go down there, you can kind of feel I don't know if it's stepping outside of time, but you can kind of, the pace of life, the pace of everything just feels slower there, and you kind of get sucked into it. And it's not the most dramatic landscape in the world. I mean, there's bigger hills, there's bigger mountains, there's larger and deeper lakes, but the way it all works together is just it's very picturesque, it's very nice. And as I say, like, something drew people there 6,000 years ago, and that keeps drawing people there today. And it's not that one culture came there, it's every culture who's come to Ireland for some reason or another has found an excuse to hang around Lough Gur and stay there. You know what I mean? So it's a place from the Neolithic to the modern times. And it's places like the Stone Circle there. I mean, the Stone Circle is initially a Neolithic monument, but it's used through the Bronze Age. Presumably it's been used into the Iron Age, into Gaelic times, and it's used now in the 21st century. You know what I mean? So I'd often say to people that while we can't know the specifics of all the religion that's went on there over the last 5,000 years, in some ways it represents a longer form of spirituality in Ireland than, let's say, Christianity or anything, in terms of its sheer longevity on the landscape. You know what I mean? And these are ancient. These are ancient monuments. I mean, I see ancient spiritual doers. These are literally ancient monuments. You know what I mean? These are monuments that are thousands of years before the Irish language. You know what I mean? This is deep into the past. You know what I mean? And I mean, again, like, it's something that we found artwork there 2 years ago that hadn't been discovered. Now, this is a site that has 100,000 people a year at least. And all of a sudden we find artwork there, and that artwork, though it hasn't been confirmed, it does seem to be marking the summer solstice. And then you'd say, okay, yeah, I mean, as I say, I stood there. Again, I'm not my background is very much, it's folklore, it's history, it's stuff like, so I'm not a practical person at all. But, I stood there on the solstice in 2023, to my very uneducated eye. The sun rises directly above the one stone that has circular carvings on the back of it. So, I mean, we know these cultures can do these things. It's not like it's existing in isolation. There's aligned monuments all over Ireland, all over Britain, down into France. There's aligned monuments all over the world, quite frankly. So you have that there. But if a site that has 100,000 people a year can hide something like that. What about all the other sites around here that aren't getting, they're getting a fraction of those visitors? What about the sites that we've lost stones, we'll say? I mean, there was a bigger stone circle next to the Grange Stone Circle, of which only 6 stones survive. That was a 72 stone circle, and it looked like it had a pile of wooden circles in there. So while we have more in Lough Gur surviving than pretty much anywhere else in the country in terms of the diversity of monuments and the quality of the monuments left here, it's still only a snapshot. I mean, I have an account from about 1820, and your man talks, he says there's at least 100 stone circles at Lough Gur. Now, he's
Wow.
probably talking, some of those are probably habitation sites that he's misidentified, but at the same time, he's saying there's 100 circles. So even if we take in the habitation sites that are there today, we're still missing 50 or 60 circles, you know what I mean, around Lough Gur. And I mean, there is like more recent accounts from fairly solid sources talking about what sound like, I mean, we can't guess, but large earthen monuments, not maybe a mile north of the lake here. Now, there's nothing there left really there today. Like, but the same if you go 3 or 4 miles north, there was a whole pile of stone circles apparently on hills up there too. So, really, it's you visit the Grange Stone Circle and you focus on that, but this is a ritualistic landscape on quite a large scale. I mean, the thing I'm massively interested in is the ancient road known as Kleine Lach. I'd argue you can without doubt trace Kleine Lach for 4 kilometers. I'll argue it's at least 7 kilometers long, and it connects the river valleys north and south with Lough Gur. Now, once you're building roads, and it's not a small road, it's the width of a modern boreen, it's 45, 50 feet across in places. So
Mm.
you're building roads that are 7 kilometers long, that are 40 feet, 50 feet wide. It's not a few lads living in a grass hut that are building this. These are complicated societies that have to be doing this because it, 4 people or 5 people in small houses can't get together to do this. This needs to have there's a designer here, there's an engineer, there's a planner. Like, so
Scheduled
these are,
organization, shall we say?
yeah, a level of complexity that I think, to be honest with you, it's we don't always fully appreciate that these societies, that there has to be a degree of complexity there. Just look at Stonehenge there recently. They're going, oh yeah, that stone's probably come from Scotland. Now, even today, I mean, obviously we can do it today, but still, how many people today are actually going to take stones from Scotland or potentially on the Highlands off the coast of Scotland and bring it 800 miles down,
Mm.
down by sea, down by whatever, then to put it there? And that's the altar stone in Stonehenge, which today you can barely even see. It's down, it's nearly buried. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And that's just
And
one
then the
example
reason
again.
behind it as well.
Of
Why
course,
they are.
yeah, and I mean they looked at so when all mammals, all animals, I suppose, are born, a layer of strontium is laying down in our teeth. So you can use that to tell where things are born, where they come from. So like a load of the cattle found in Stonehenge were all born in the Scottish Highlands.
Mm.
So again, 4.5, 5,000 years ago, they're bringing cattle. And I mean, there's no road 800 years ago going through Britain. How are you actually bringing cattle the whole way down? It's incredible. It's really incredible that what was the motivation. And again, that presumably it seems unlikely that you would have a pocket of civilization up in the highlands with growing the cows and then nothing and then Stonehenge down below. So presumably it's island wide. And I mean, the axes found in Lough Gur are coming from parts of Wales, parts of the north of Ireland, Scotland as well. So there's a level of interconnectivity there. I was listening to a marine archaeologist talk maybe 12 or 18 months ago, and she says, like, you can't picture the Irish Sea during the Neolithic and the Bronze Age as being this empty, vast emptiness and nothing there. She's like, picture it like today. She said, there's boats moving back and forth. She said, people are interacting with each other. There's more going on. I think we still have the image in our head of, we can't get out of our head like these things when we're children. So we think of Stone Age and we think of cavemen and we think of primitiveness in a kind of a, like when we consider the few remaining Stone Age cultures today, we think of them as being in the jungle, in Papua New Guinea and the Amazon, whatever, and they're living very isolated, simplistic lives. But the Neolithic and the Stone Age in Europe isn't like that. These are, you've got stuff there happening in Malta 7,000 years ago and Hypogeum and stuff, and then that sweeps across Europe. So it's, and I mean, again, obviously stuff is getting pushed back the whole time as well in terms of dates. Like, so, really, I suppose, like when I was a child, to put it in context, the Stone Circle, we were told, was 3,800 years old. It's been carbon dated to 5,000 years ago now, the embankment. So already the 1,200 year shift, and when the houses were discovered in Lough Gur, they said Neolithic was 500 years. We now know it's at least 1,500 years, And I mean, these things, it shifts and changes, and that's what happened in Lough Gur is curious because Lough Gur it's a lake surrounded by hills. We're in East Limerick, so it's not, again, sometimes you kind of expect these things to be way off in, West Kerry up in Mayo or whatever, But you have a series of hills, and for whatever reason, every generation or every culture who came along, they built stuff out of stone, and the stone is left there. So you nearly have it's like the pages of a book, and we can go back and we can go back. And I mean, we can't explain everything, we can't understand everything because there isn't a there. I mean, there isn't an instruction manual to all these sites and what their ultimate function was to us. But like, there's more here to kind of think about it, to intuitively kind of try and understand it or whatever than in
Right.
most places.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, what we're going to encourage our beautiful sort of people that are coming on our 10, 11 day tour. And when we bring them to certain sites, we're not saying we've got the answers. We're
Yeah.
saying, what do you think? What do you intuit when you're here yourself? And one of the things that's pretty obvious and clear from anyone that comes to Lough Gur is there's a very real kind of magic. And maybe that magic is connected with the fairy folk or the elementals or going back to a time before, like you say, organized religion and Christianity and stuff. What can our guests expect when we rock up to Lough Gur on the Saturday morning on the tour? You're going to bring us first out to the Wedge Tomb, is it?
Well, no, we'll start at the Stone Circle because it's
Okay.
it's the yeah, start at the circle. So I mean, you could be honest with you, you could spend the whole day at the Stone Circle. So we'll do the Stone
We will.
Circle. I mean, again, but I mean, you could, there's so much there. So I mean,
Yeah.
because it's a stone circle complex. So even though we call it the Grange Stone Circle, there's another stone circle in the field beyond. That ancient road is there. There's a standing stone called Lough Gur, which is the stone of the sacred tree, which again links in with Anya. We might talk about it in a minute. So we'd
Mhm.
start at the stone circle, and I'm of the same mind as you, Carl. I feel my job here. So I'm from this area. I've lived here pretty much all my life. I run the visitor centre here now. I've spent the last 10 years researching it. My own academic background is I have an undergraduate in heritage studies and I'm studying mythology and folklore as a master's at the moment. So really for me, I suppose I feel my position is I know this landscape intimately. I know the folklore of the stories. I know the people who live here. So I have a good thing, but it's again, I can't give you the answers. I don't have all the answers. But my thing is I'm
You've
here
got
to kind
more
of
answers than some.
I presume I might do. But I suppose for me again, it's what I like to do because again, I mean, when you go to the Stone Circle, I'm sure 100 times or 1,000 times people have gotten what the Stone Circle is exactly, and half the time, if not most of the time, probably someone who's went in there without any preconceptions or notions beforehand,
Yeah.
and intuitively they've just got it, and they might have even said it out loud. What they've just said in their head, or they've said it maybe to who's ever with them, and it's probably they've went down with their life and haven't thought about it, because I mean, chance if nothing else, or the law of averages says that has to happen. So people will find it. So it's not my place to tell you. I can tell you what the stone circle isn't for because we know what it isn't for from the archaeological thing. Again, I mean, archaeology is the study of material remains. Remember, that's all it is like. So, I mean, you can use archaeology to a certain extent, but really, once you get into matters of spirituality, matters of belief in the past, archaeology can't tell you a massive amount. Archaeology could show you where ritual happened. It can show you the physical remains of the ritual. It can't tell you the why of the ritual, really. That's just the reality of it. So, I mean, I would say archaeology for me is always a good base upon which to begin these explorations. But then the archaeology takes you to here, and to go further, that's when you have to use intuition. It's literally what we have left. You use intuition, you use your own belief structures, you use your own sense of, you know, I like going down to the Stone Circle, late at night, early in the morning, by myself, and you get that feeling there. You know what I mean? I mean, it's aligned to the summer solstice, so to a certain extent, it's not a nighttime site. I suppose it probably is a daytime site, but a lot of these places, it's when you're there for a few minutes, you can, because even there this morning, I had a tour this morning, so I went down a bit early and I just walked around, and like there's still stones there, and I stop and I look and I say, I've never really paid attention to that stone
You
before. You know
learn
what I mean?
something new every time.
Yeah, of course. And it's as I say, it was like with the snow, like you're seeing the land in a different way again, and I'm seeing things that I don't normally see. And there was like rock faces that were more prominent than they normally are. And I mean, there's constantly I'm in fields and I'm like, there's a stone there, and I'm going, it might just be a random stone, but again, I'm going, wow, it's kind of, there's a standing. I mean, it's a massive stone. It's about 6 or 7 feet high, this stone, and it's in a field, and it's in a fairly publicly accessible field. It's not a recorded monument. Now, it's on a line of an ancient road, another ancient road called Bohernaliagon, which is the road of the standing stones. So it's
Mm.
on this line. It's never been recorded. Now it's 25, 30 meters from the road. So it's not even remote. Like, I mean, there's 5 or 10 standing stones around Lough Gur that I'm aware of. Now, I can't definitively say they're all Bronze Age or earlier standing stones, but there's some of them almost certainly are, and they're not even recorded. At the top of the hill where I grew up,
Were
and
there
next to it.
landmarks? Were they literally to mark the way for people traveling
Well,
from?
I would, yeah. I mean, that is so on the top of the hill. So where I live is just outside Bruff, is where I grew up. So Carraig Aille it's called. And you've got a small hill called Bruff Hill. When you go up the Bruff Hill, big 6 foot high standing stone, then again up there. It's definitely prehistoric. You can tell by the shape of this one. That's not a recorded monument. Now, when you're on top of that hill, there's an old boreen that is arrow straight. Now, I think it's actually part of that ancient road, Klein-Alack. It's the same width as it and everything. But when you're on the top of that hill, all you can see is Knock Fennel, which is the main hill in Lough Gur. The road is pointing directly towards Lough Gur, and it's
Mm.
what I feel, as you say, the standing stone is there. So when people are doing this journey, I have an idea, to be honest with you. It's something I'll have to develop, that you have the Grange Stone Circle complex, and then there's another stone circles up on a hill called Knockcrew.
Mm.
And Knockcrew and the Grange Stone Circle, to me, are both curiously built next to the ancient roads or close to them. And I have a feeling there might be a
So
massive
is it
ceremonial loop
possible?
there.
Is
Yeah.
it possible that people would have come to the Stone Circle from all over Ireland, maybe all over Europe? Was it a commercial
I
center
It was
of?
definitely, yeah. I mean, even
Yeah.
even the most kind of hard-nosed archaeologist would say to you that what happened in Lough Gur represents a much bigger community than lived at Lough Gur. So there are certainly people coming here. I mean, the archaeological evidence again is clear. This is the same people who are building Newgrange, who are building now Doubt, Lough
Yeah.
Crew, yeah, Lough Crew, Carramore, Carraig Aille, all these sites. It's the same culture. So there's no reason to believe that they're not at the minimum traveling at
Mm.
least Ireland. Now, I mean, again, it gets more like, I mean, there isn't and again, like, I know I'm not an expert on Neolithic archaeology or anything, but like, there's a massive overlap between Ireland and Britain, and then down into Brittany as well. Like, so, I
Yeah.
mean, I would say, yeah, I mean, I would say the evidence is that you have if not a kind of a, if not one centralized culture, you certainly have. I would believe that the people in the southeast of England will say could be brought over to Lough Gur 5,000 years ago, and you're not going to have culture shock. They'll understand what they're looking at. You have a parent culture, in a certain extent, like Western culture today. You know what I mean? We can go to New Zealand and Australia and feel we'll understand our way around the shopping centre far quicker than if we went to Burkina Faso or something. So that's kind of there too. Like, and again, as I say, like,
It's a
there's,
fair point. I've never
yeah,
been to
I mean,
Burkina
there's,
Faso, but I accept that. Yeah.
yeah, but there's no, you see, I suppose it's in the absence of a written record, it kind of makes past culture silent. But that just because we don't know what went on doesn't mean that a lot wasn't going on. I mean,
Mm.
there's a spot in the stone circle where you get this very noticeable amplification of your voice. Now, it could be a byproduct of when you build a stone circle. I don't know, but equally, we have a site that is, it's a ceremonial site. It almost, while we can't definitively say that, it almost has to be a
I think
ceremonial site.
if they had the technology to align certain stones with the setting sun on the solstice or the rising sun on the equinox or what have you, then there's probably no accident that there are certain acoustics at play as well.
Oh yeah, and I mean it goes. I mean, so you have over in Malta a hypogeum as well, which is I believe about 7,000 years old. There's acoustic stuff going on there that is, it's far more impressive than what happens in Grange, quite frankly. So if they can do it 7,000 years ago, they can certainly do it in Grange later. And then but it's an amazing thing then, because what you have there is you have an embankment that you potentially could have crowd or visitors, or not visitors, but a viewing public or people gathered on it. And then if you've got a big crowd of people, the worst thing is that you have to shout. So then all of a sudden someone says, no, no, we've got this sound thing here. And then
Mm.
equally, it could be used for throat singing, it could be used for drumming. But if you're there on a quiet day by yourself, you can, and interestingly, actually, when I bring school groups there, the kids generally they can't get this effect. Their voices aren't deep enough, so they
Okay.
can't get this resonation. So maybe it's been used for, as I said, deep throat singing or something along those lines. But again, it's almost, it's, and while we have more here, as I said, in most places, the beauty of prehistory is what also is maddening, is that there's all these questions that are so difficult to answer, and then the fact that what makes it beautiful is the fact that there won't ever be an answer. And something about that is nice too, because it doesn't really matter to a certain extent. If we use the stone circle in a slightly different way from its original intent, that's not the worst thing in the world. You know what I mean? Sites get reused the whole time. You know what I mean? And it's our understanding of it just through the passage of time, if nothing else, means it will have to be a slightly different thing, no matter how close we ever do get to its true function. You know, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because it's built over time as well.
Right.
Yeah, things
They
shift and change.
use it during, yeah, of course, and that's absolutely fine. You know, so I mean, we'll say even the big stone in the circle is Crom Dove, from Dove. So Crom Dove is an Iron Age god. He's a Gaelic god, a god of the harvest, amongst other things. We don't know when he begins, but almost certainly the name has to be brought on after the Irish language. It's an Irish language name. So the name could be there 3,000 years. It might be there 300 years, 1,000 years. It could be there. Well, it's definitely there 200 or 300 years at least. You know, Crum Dove is fascinating too because so the English language 19th century sources tell us they say Crum Dove, the dark stooped one. They talk about him being this smaller, dark-skinned man who arrived in Ireland with the first bushel of wheat on his shoulders. Now that's there from before any genetics or anything was, well, your man was probably doing his pea experiments, but like it's long ago. We now know, like genetically speaking, that the people who precede the ancestors of the Irish would be, relatively speaking, shorter, darker, and they did bring wheat with them. Whether it was literally on their shoulders or not, I don't know. But there you have this tiny little bit of 19th century folklore that you can, without needing to massage or coax it too much, you can
Yeah,
certainly see an interesting analogy with what science is apparently telling us today about the peopling of it. And that's a fascinating thing. And that's the other thing about Lough Gur, which is the intangible aspect of it. So you have these big monuments, you have these things in the landscape which, visually impressive and obviously they're beautiful to be around, There's obviously a lovely feeling in the circle. There's, genuinely there is. But like what's probably more impressive to me about Lough Gur is the Anya connection. Because again, Anya is a sovereignty goddess. She's the land goddess. She's, to a certain extent, she is the land itself. She's almost a kind of a human expression of the land, a feminine human expression of the land. But Anya was never forgotten around here. And like we're in East Limerick again. Again, we're not out in the Blasket Islands or we're not, way out in Counter and Nilon. We're in East Limerick. So you go, how curious is that? So across from my mother's house, we'll say again, I'm looking out my sitting room, about a mile from my house, mile and a half, is Canuck Anya, Anya's Hill. So, like from when we were young, that concept was there that Anya lived on the hill. Now we called her the fairy queen. We kind of thought her as the queen of the fairies, and it's all really positive about her. Actually, she didn't really have a dark. Certainly not when we were growing up. So she's seen as this nice,
mm,
beautiful woman generally. So the fairy queen, but that existed concurrently. It's not like we were kind of aware of a kind of a pagan deviancy in our childhood or whatever. But clearly we had. So we all went to mass on a Sunday, but still on the hill outside my window, a hill I was looking at more than the church as it happens. Anya was there, and I mean the concept of Anya has continued, and it's not this isn't a modern kind of reimagining that's happened to say kind of post 1960s or anything. So if you look in the schools collection in 1938, which is it's basically the schools collection, just to briefly explain it, in the late 1930s, the folklore commission went around, got all the kids to go out to just the rural areas, which was a bit of an oversight, but they went to all the rural areas and asked them to talk to the oldest people about customs, traditions, and various things. So a lot of it is to do, like there's songs, there's poems and stuff, but someone like myself who's interested in traditional folklore, you get a lot of really good spooky kind of stuff and stuff about, the banshee, various other things like that. So there's this one story in one of and there's a lot about Lough Gur in it. And in it, a girl, and I can't remember her name now, but she gets this story, and the story is simple. It says that a man called James Cleary, they say 80 years hence, James Cleary went swimming in Lough Gur and he drowned. And then it says, and this goes to show that the call of the White Lady is always impervious and cannot be ignored. Now, the White Lady is Anya. That's what
mm,
Anya was called during most of the 20th century. So, what you have here is in 1938, on the cusp of modernity, the electricity is going in. A little girl goes home, and an old woman tells her that, yeah, a fella drowned in the lake. Not, he didn't drown. He was selected essentially. He was chosen by the goddess.
mm.
So it kind of breaks the idea of this is meant to be 1930s Ireland when the church is at its most powerful and we're meant to be at this one of the more bleaker parts of Irish history. Yet that old woman is comfortable enough to tell this little girl that. And the fact that that gets recorded like that means that it can't be even this can't even be fringed to a certain extent, because if
Right.
that was the case, she probably wouldn't tell it. Like, so she has to be comfortable enough with this idea to say it to a child. So, and I mean, rural Ireland is still rural Ireland. I mean, you don't want to stand out too much from your neighbours. So that's why like it's a fascinating thing. Like, and it's the thing too. James Cleary did drown. I have the newspaper clipping from 1861. So James Cleary went swimming in the lake. James Cleary drowned. And the idea is that once every 7 years, the lake demands a sacrifice. And I mean, it's not quite every 7 years, like, but I mean, the records aren't perfect either. But there's enough going on there, to be honest with you. If you take every decade, you can nearly fill it in, doom, 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 going back probably 140, 50 years, and it's like the next to my house, another hill is called Killalock. So Cluchan Spirit is up there, the Rock of the Spirit. And that's meant to be on the sites where Anya is seen. And when I came home 3 years ago to take over the visitor centre, when I came home, I said, I'm really going to start focusing now on chatting to the old people, getting the stories from them. And I started getting Banshee stories. And I was like, this is unbelievable. I'm like, I'm the only person in Ireland who'll be getting this stuff. And I was just incredible. But it's reached a point now, like, where it's become so matter of fact that people generally have these stories that, like, I don't really even take them down anymore. I note them, but it's become, it's, I wouldn't say the magic is worn off of it for me, but it's
There's an
very
oral
much featured.
tradition.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I know more people who've heard the Banshee and have seen Pine Martins at this stage, you know what I mean, around here, so, and
Yeah.
you kind of, I remember Eddie Lenihan one time. He's a fantastic Shanachie and gatherer of folklore. And I remember him talking, and everyone else says, "Oh, Eddie believes in the fairies and all this." And he was saying, "Well, you have two ways of looking at it." He says, "One, Eddie's just a gobshite." He says, "But otherwise, Eddie's just this kind of gobshite." But then he's literally talked to hundreds and hundreds of people at this stage, over 50, 60 years. And you say, if every one of them is lying, what a fantastically interesting psychological thing that is, that all these people who are unconnected with each other over a large swathe of time have all decided. Because surely at some stage you reached a kind of a critical point and you said, you know, I mean, I've heard recordings of a woman in Donegal there where she was talking, she must have been in her 80s and they're recording, and I know her family and stuff as well, and they're quite respected academic people. And in the recording, she's talking about when she was up in Donegal. They see the Banshee as well. We don't see the Banshee; we just hear her around here. But she's recounting a story of going back over the mountains where they lived and the Banshee flying over. Now, when you hear that recording, that woman is not lying. You
Mm.
can argue maybe what she's saying, it's been distorted over time, but when she's telling that story, she's telling the truth. Like, and the few hairs I've left in my head were just, they would just stand. You know what I mean? Because it's genuinely, and
So come here.
it's yeah,
I have I don't want to sort of derail you, but I
yeah.
have in my head I have this connection between the goddess Aine and the sun, and I'm thinking ancient Egypt and Ra, and I'm thinking there's some kind of is there a genuine connection with ancient
Yeah,
Egypt and
it's
sun
funny
worship
now.
and the
Yeah,
goddess
well,
Aine?
the son, so T.F.R. Aille wrote a book in 1946 called Early Irish History and Mythology. So in that he draws, so the Anya's name comes from an old Irish word, Anya, which can again means brightness, sunshine, radiance. So there's a lot of words there that would tie in with the sun. I mean, again, like, it's academically you'd be slaughtered for this, but like, you have the stone circle, which has, I would say, strong solar stuff going on there. There's evidence, I would say,
What's
now
the
for,
analogy with a womb, maybe?
well, I mean, that comes again from, so Lough Gur is interesting. So the original recording of the name is, the earliest one I've seen is from the Annals of Innisfallen. It's from a bit over 1,000 years ago. It's written as Lough Gar, Gar, Gair, which Gar in modern Irish could mean shout or proclamation, various other things. Now, in modern Irish, it's written as Lough Gar, which is Gar, can mean incubation, broodiness, hatchlings, a lot of things like that. But there's a eulogy from the 16th century from, who wrote it? Pierce McFerret wrote it, from one of the Fitzgeralds who died out in Flanders, I believe. And I've never seen the Irish language version of it. I've been looking for it, I can't find it. I've seen the English translation by Crofton Croker, and it says something along the lines of it, Anya from her hidden nested awake, the voicey woman, or the woman of wailing from Lough Gur's voicey lake. Now, in those two lines, you've got all those different explanations for what Lough Gur could mean, which is It's incredible, like, because it's just. And then I was in Edinburgh there before Christmas, and I bought like a Scots Gaelic dictionary from about 200 years ago. And looking through it, just looked up the word Gar. And I mean, Irish and Scots Gaelic are. I was reading some Scots Gaelic there a while ago. I don't think I can pronounce it. I can read it fine. And Gar is in there, and Gar in Scots Gaelic in this dictionary from 200 years ago was the sound of a woman crying as she drowns. And you say, well, you
Wow.
know, which is crazy. You know what I mean? Now, again, I can't prove anything with it, but it's certainly interesting. You know what I mean? And it's
These are the stories that captivate people, though. It's like not everybody necessarily wants the academic and archaeological aspects, although there's nothing to take away from that. But I think people, what they're coming for is the storytelling angle, is the magic of myth and
it
legend,
is.
and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
fairy folk and the goddess Aine is very prevalent still today, as much as it ever was.
Well, that's I suppose for me when I started kind of about 10 years ago down this road of Lough Gur, what happened to me, to be honest with you, was I had in my head that I knew everything about the stone circle. And then when you take a step back, I realized I knew it was a circle, I knew it had stones, and I knew it was old. But in my head, I had this 10-page essay written. Now I realize I knew none of it. So then you start researching, and then more and more comes out. So I started very much on facts and figures. That's really what I was interested in. So there was 113 stones, it's 45.6 meters wide. It was 2,500 and 2,950 BC, all these things. But then after a while, I realized it's really like the meters doesn't really matter. Like it's the story of it is what I'm interested in now. You know what I mean? So you have again that stone. It's a
Does
nice
each
kind of
stone have a name?
well, each individual stone in a field, most of them would have at one stage had names. So at the moment, I'm working on a project on place names, so just names in the area. So I have some of the stone names. So the stone next to the stone circle is Cluckavilla. So Cluckavilla. So if you take look at it literally, stone of the sacred tree. So an archaeological interpretation is that it's probably a Gaelic era inauguration site. And that's fine. It might be. You could also Billa could also mean tax. It could mean the stone of the tax. Maybe they pay taxes there. I wouldn't personally I don't follow that. But for me, you have this really important story that once every 7 years, and the stone circle, I should say, as a segue, is about 200 yards from the lake shore of Lough Gur itself. So once every 7 years, Lough Gur disappears. And where there was once a lake, there's now just this green field, big long green field. And in the middle of it grows this singular tree. And this tree is 1,000 feet high and it shades out 10,000 acres. And sitting amongst the roots of this tree is an old woman and she's knitting. This is Anya. So Anya typically appears in a young woman form, but she can appear as an old woman as well. And at this time, she
The
appears
one
as
with
an old
name
woman.
and throne, right?
Exactly, 100%. So she's knitting. So the story goes that about 200 years ago, Abu Khalim, a little boy, he's riding on his horse when the enchantment takes hold. The water disappears. He sees the tree, he sees the cloak covering the tree, and he says to himself, I'm having that cloak. He kicks his horse into a gallop and rides down the middle of this new field. Rides past Anya, reaches up, grabs the yarn and pulls it, drags this cloak down from the crown of the tree and rides off to the other side of the lake. As soon as he does, Anya stands up and she shouts at him in fury. She shouts this curse. She says, Cuat, cuat, a bu na balov, ig marciuch do hir na man marov, ig fuaduch and fratuna dom vahas, which is there's a translation of from the 19th century, which I think is kind of nonsense. So a more literal translation I would say is to you, like hark, hear, whatever. Hey, she's calling him out. To you, permanent silence. She's cursing him with the inability to speak, which is a motif you find in other stories around Lough Gur as well, associated with Anya's son, Gerodírla. To you, the permanent silence. Ig marciuchta here na man mara feet are riding from the land of the dead woman, and ig fuadach, which is like it's abducting really, but seizing or taking from my head the green cloak. And when she shouts this curse, all of a sudden all the water that wasn't there is there behind Anya. And she sends it off, and it's torrent, a tsunami after this young fella on the horse. And he's riding for all his work now, trying to get to the far side of the lake. And just as he reaches where the old shoreline was, Anya's hand emerges from the wave and pulls the cloak clear from him. He jumps from his horse and lands on the ground, boom, with a thump, and he's left looking up at the blue sky. When he finally gets his breath back, he looks down, and the lake is as it always was. Dark, mysterious, water, flat.
Mhm.
There's no tree, there's no sign of Anya.
And he's gone
Then he
home
looks
to
down.
rethink his life.
Well, he is, but then he looks over, looks down, and sees his horse has gone glassy eyed, and he sees the horse has been torn asunder with the bottom
Oh
Oh,
half
no.
taken down. And what the old people used to say is that if the cloak and Anya ever get separated from each other, Lough Gur will be no more, and anyone who lives around its shores also.
Mm.
So, well, again, I can't prove this. That is one of the, I would say, foundational stories of Lough Gur. It's a very important story around Lough Gur. And yet, then you have next to its most important archaeological site a stone called Clough Villa, the stone of the sacred tree, which, as I say, can be an inauguration site, but maybe I often think is a Clough Villa precisely because it's there to remind us that at the bottom of the lake there's
Yeah.
things going on that we can't possibly understand, you know? And it's
I've got a bad feeling we're going to run out of time. So I want to ask you a couple of questions.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I want to be rude and jumping in.
No, no, you're fine.
There's
Yeah.
a part of the complex where I went there 2 or 3 times. I think it's called Carraig Aille, and it's like a
Carraig Aille,
little
yeah, yeah.
high site. And I remember it because I stood in a big cowpat when we were up at the top of there, and that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
usually stick in the memory. But it was such an amazing sort of panoramic view around everywhere from there. You didn't actually have to ascend too high. But
Yeah.
the view itself and the nature of where it was perfect as a lookout tower. What's the significance of the name and that place
So yeah,
as part of the
Car-
complex?
so Carraig Aille it's locally it's pronounced Carraig Aille. So the sign says Carraig Aille, which is it's erroneous. It means something like the rock of the cliff, but Carraig Aille, the bright rock. So it's there's a medieval text called Mesca Ullid, the intoxication of the Ulstermen, and they talk about the shining rocks over Lough Gur. So what that is there, that's the Gaelic era ring fort. So it's the initial habitation was about 1200 years ago. But you've summed it up perfectly. As you say, you only climb for 2 or 3 minutes, and all of a sudden you have this massively opened expanse around you. You've this panoramic view of a massive area in Munster. And like from up there on a good day, you can clearly see the Paps down in Killarney. And again, the Paps, there'll be some evidence certainly that Anya and Anu are cognate to a certain degree. And like, and I can't prove this, there is a standing stone on another hill, which does seem to be, when you get level with the top of it, the two Paps do seem to balance on it. So you can see the Paps from up there. But that site up there allows you to, I suppose, really see the landscape, So from that vantage point, you can see Lough Gur, Bunaghania, you can see all the hills around. You really get the sense of what it is. And then those two ring forts, one of the reasons I think they're there is because Bohern and Leagon, the ancient road from thousands of years beforehand, was already in place. So they were building their ring forts next to pre-existing roads.
I got the sense that I felt almost guilty or ashamed not paying to be there. I felt like I ought to have tipped or made some kind of donation. It was such a hugely I wouldn't say spiritual, but you kind of feel inspired. You feel the
Yeah,
real
yeah.
connection with the land and with the view and with everything around you. It's like I'm like, surely I need to pay to be here. There's almost like I need to leave something here, or I need to, leave. It's a strange kind of feeling, but I totally get the connection with
It's one of my favorite places
yeah.
in Lough Gur is up there. And as you say, even though it doesn't have an ancient site on top. Well, I mean, it's still over 1,000 years old, like, but it doesn't have an ancient site up there. But as you say, you can, I mean, without sounding like a kind of a Victorian colonist or anything, I can kind of see my world and my landscape from up there. There's all the hills I know are there, the lake is there, and you can. I mean, I suppose from up there, you're in to a certain extent, you're seeing Anya, really. You know what I mean? Because
Mm.
that is the land. This is so like the old name of the area was Donaghmore outside Limerick. Its full name is Donaghmore My Anya, so the plain of Anya. So Anya's plain comes all the way down. You know what I mean? So there's there's a dozen or 15 place names around here that have Anya's name hidden in there.
Mhm.
Some of them obvious, some of them not so obvious. Like so, Anya was, and she continues to be honest, because it never fully went away. So Anya's just been the central part of life. And I mean, the traditions in the hill in Lough Gur continued well into the 19th century, like potentially even the early 20th century. And there's just yeah, that site. It's a place actually. When I do tours and bring people up there, I don't talk a whole lot because sometimes there's
The
you can
landscape
say so
speaks
much.
for
The
itself.
landscape, exactly. I can't compete with that. You know what I mean? Nor should
Nor
I.
do
You know
you
what I
need
mean?
to. You complement
Yeah.
it perfectly.
Yeah, you have an amazing passion. It comes
Oh, thanks.
through
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
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 I mean, I suppose it's again. It's the. there's always been someone in Lough Gur way before me who's kind of focused on it and researched. And I suppose I was the first person of I was the first person who has access to newspaper archives online, things like that, who has access to a wealth of material that the people before me, they had to go up to the National Library just to try and see one thing. I can do all this in minutes. So there's always been someone to do it, and I suppose arrogantly or otherwise, I just stepped into the role, I suppose. So I mean, I'm literally standing on the shoulders of people who, there's been literally for the last
I don't
120,
think there's
30
any
years.
arrogance there. You come over as a very humble man, Brian, and
Oh,
I think
very much, yeah.
it's almost you were born for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing. I can show you on every road to Lough Gur, well, a bit outside Lough Gur, I suppose, but those, that sense of I'm home again. You know what I mean? I can kind of feel I'm in my place. Like, and it's just there's kind of I see it because I remember an old man came one time to Lough Gur, an Australian guy, and he had a oxygen mask on him and two tanks with him. And when he came up to the visitor centre, he had to sit down and we'd benches outside at the time. And I thought I was going to call an ambulance for him. I said, wow. And he was really, really no, he wasn't well. Like I assume this man now has passed away since. And after he got his breath back, I was kind of saying, why are you pushing yourself so hard just to, you were at the lake, sure. I mean, okay, it's slightly nicer from the visitors, but why push yourself? And he said to me, he was raised in the outback in Australia by his grandfather. And he said his grandfather was this really surly old man. And he said, never happy. And he said it was a rough childhood. You're out in the middle of nowhere, he'd no neighbors. He had this old, miserable grandfather. And his grandfather was an Irish guy. And his grandfather had left Ireland, I think he said in 1916. And he said, in all the years of living with his grandfather, the only time he ever saw his grandfather look anyway happy was when he talked about swimming in a lake in Lough Gur as a child called Lough Gur, right? And the old man had said to himself, someday I'm going to see that lake. And so he dragged himself. He'd never flown, I don't even think, before. He dragged
Wow.
himself from Australia to
That was his
Limerick as an
life's
old,
journey.
unhealthy man. And he got up there and he got to see that lake, you know what I mean? And you'd say, that's a powerful thing, you know what I mean? And I get so many stories like that of even there was a famous folklorist, Bo Almquist was his name, and his daughter was there one day, and she was saying, "Oh, the last time I saw my father truly happy, there was another folklorist from Bruff called Ioho gone." She said, "I remember the two of them sitting on the lake shore there," and she said they were nearly sick. The two of them were laughing so much, you know what I mean? And it's just you hear all these kind of stories, and it's just so powerful stuff. It really is powerful stuff,
There's
you
a
know. And
real
The
magic there.
site is powerful. I mean, you're talking
it
about
is,
the all of the different history through it and the religions, but the actual site, like I didn't even know what I was driving past. I'm living where I'm living right now,
yeah,
driving to Limerick City, and I'm like getting pulled my attention down to the side, and I'm like, why do I keep looking down there? And then
yeah,
I figured out it was Lough Gur and Grange Stone Circle. It's got this magnetic pull that you don't even know what you're being pulled towards.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's pure magic.
It is. Even I remember meeting Mancon McGann down there. That's a guy who's done a lot of, he's been to a lot of places, and he was the same. Like, because you'd nearly be kind of going, oh, he probably won't think much of this place now, and he's just kind of going, Jesus, man, this place is blowing me away. And you're
Mhm.
going, wow, like this is a guy who's, he's seen far more of the sacred and ancient sites of Ireland than I have, like. And you kind of, I suppose, you don't expect that, but then I mean, I would say once every week or two, I have someone who comes to the lake, and they're just like that. They've kind of said yeah, just kind of ended up down here, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Just kind of, as you say, it got drawn down here, and then
yeah.
you're in this place that, I mean, it doesn't even look like the surrounding countryside. Like, it's this
Mhm.
seven hills surrounding
It's
a
quite
small lake.
unique, isn't it? It's
It
very
is,
unique in its
it's a,
aspect.
it's a contained area, and I mean, it's even, I mean, like I say, from my mother's house, I can see the hill of Lough Gur, but I'm from a mile or two away from it. So, but it's very much it's its own area, and so I've lived down here now for going on 3 years, and locally, I think I'm starting to be accepted. I'll still always be a blow-in, but you know what I mean? But I'm still being accepted. And that's part of it is there's like even I was talking to one of the old men the other day and he says, oh, because they're behind my house where I'm living, there's the Lake Bog. It's a 25-acre bog. It's amazing. You can't really get in there. It's too dangerous. Like, but he was saying like, the last of the old men who knew the paths through the bog and stuff. Like some of the old men are giving me where the old paths they used to walk as
There's a lot
children
of
are.
secrets in that bog.
Oh, I mean, there was two Cranogs in there. There was I know as well there was an IRA arms dump in the 1920s. There's a load of different things going on there, you know what I mean? But yeah, the lake, well, to be honest with you, the Lake Bog, like, is sometimes said to be the kind of the source of Anya here. So that was originally a lake up until about 1845, and I mean, it must have looked incredible. Like, because even when you're down there now today, and there's a lot of trees and all growing in there now because it's a bog, but when it was a lake, it must have just been incredible. And that would have been the original. There was a well down there at one stage as well, you know. But there's, I mean, it's still, I mean, even, I every now and then talk to some old person, all of a sudden they tell me something, I'm like, Jesus, that's incredible, you know what I mean? And just, they had this connection to the landscape. I mean, there's a place called the Money Hole, which is over in
Mm.
Knockatoon, which is, I suppose, from where I'm sitting now, it's maybe 300 meters. And like I've talked to people who were told about this, like it sounds horrible, a 17-foot tall bull with fire coming out of his nostrils who guards this site. You know what I mean? And people you see this bull with enough regularity that it was recorded. And as I say, I've talked to people who are still living who remember the story being told to
Right.
them when they were young. And thanks for that. And sorry, one second, morning. You wouldn't just take her out, would you? Sorry, the dog is going nuts. But what you call it, there was a path going down along the side of Knockadoon. So then people would have been walking that at night. And I mean, I always say I brought a tour of Argentinians around today. And I was telling them stories about Gerard and about various other things. And I stopped in at the end of it and I said, "Oh, do you believe that?" And they say, "Oh no, I don't." And I said, "I know you don't." But I says, "If you were here by yourself at night time, you'd say, I wish you hadn't told me that story." And I said, "And it's very easy to dismiss this stuff during the middle of the day when you've 20 people around you, there's electricity going everywhere. But when you're in Lough Gur by yourself at night,
Mm.
there is a heaviness in the silence, and there's a sense of
You don't want to
like
be there alone at night, I guess.
it's. I mean, there's definitely. I look. I mean, it doesn't bother me telling stories of things that I've seen. So when that Saoirse, my dog, was going out there, when she was a pup, you know yourself with pups, you have to bring them out to go wee a lot during the night. So I brought her out. It was around 2 in the morning,
It's not
and we
being
were
alone
locked
if
her.
you're with a dog.
Well, no, no, this is true. So I brought her out. She was weeing, and she was only a pup at the time. She's still quite excitable. She was excitable then, certainly. And this dog came out of the gloom and walked past me. And the dog looked now to be nearly waist high. He kind of never seen the breed, but kind of some mastiff looking thing. I'd never seen it before. And the dog just walked past my gate. Now my house is literally there's my house. I have a garden that's 12 feet wide and then the road. So he was within touching distance of me. And he just walked past me without looking at me at all. My dog paid no attention. And I was like, that's weird. So I
Is it
whistled
an
for the dog.
apparition?
Well, this is what it. I whistled. I went to the dog, and he kind of, rather contemptuously, I'd say, threw his head over his shoulder, looked at me, and walked off into the gloom with my dog acting as if the dog isn't there. Now, a lot of the roads around here, people talk about the black dog.
Yeah.
The black dog is a pretty dodgy creature that you see there at night, you know what I mean? I know all the dogs who live around here. He's certainly not one of the dogs who live here. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
again, logic says there was a random 3 foot high, giant muscular black dog walking the road at night time and he just came for a nighttime stroll to Lough Gur and he's gone. But that's the stuff you can kind of, you know, it happened. I saw it. You know what I mean? So,
I
and
get
then
the
you kind of,
feeling I get the feeling we could chat all night long, Brian.
yeah, I mean, this is the reality of it.
I love these stories, but I want to jump in there just to
Yeah,
say for all of our guests on the tour, I don't know if you can see that there with the joys
oh,
of
I can. Wow.
Zoom. We've put
Yes.
together
Put it in front of your chest.
Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly. Like that there.
don't know if
Wow.
you can see that. It's a
Yeah.
handcrafted journal for everyone that's coming on
Oh,
our
wow.
tour to be able to do some journaling and some diarying and to write about their experiences when they're
Yeah.
coming to these ancient sacred sites. And it sounds to me like you've got the bones of a book in you, maybe more than one, with all
Yeah.
fabulous and amazing
That'll
stories.
be the hope eventually is, as I say, my problem is always halfway through a project, I'm thinking about the next one. So my place names, I need to finish the place names one, just have it done and dusted. And then the next one will be gathering all the folklore into one place. So
Yeah.
I'll put it there. I'll put it a mixture of all the written stuff that's there, the stuff I've been told myself, because some of the best stuff I've heard in recent years is like minor sites. Like there's a place called the Moat Field, I've been told. Just crazy stories. The stories again that like just very briefly, a guy was telling me he was walking like the moat is like a fairy ring in the field, but no one goes into the field like and he was sitting there or he was standing there on the phone, sorry, and basically he heard like what sounded like 15 or 20 horses going past him and dogs, like the dead hunter, the wild hunter, whatever, and there was nothing there. Like and he was on the phone at the time and he asked the guy on the phone if he could hear it, and your man on the phone couldn't hear anything, like. And he got in touch with Eddie Lynn, and then he was saying it to me afterwards, like, but I was asking him when it was, and he's like, oh, I don't know, maybe a night or two after Halloween. And like again, folklore tells us that around Halloween, the good people are moving from their summer home to their winter home. No,
And
Oh,
I
there's a
did.
word that came up recently. I love this word. I think it was one of my guests on the Menscape podcast, and he used the word liminal. And
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's a real sort of ethereal and liminal quality to Lough Gur, where the veil is quite thin
yeah.
between worlds, I would say. Yeah.
And that's the, I mean, the Celtic otherworld is different from kind of Christian conceptions of heaven and hell. Like the other world is all around us. I mean, the reason we call the good people Nadini Maha or Nahushla, the nobles, is because they can hear us. They're around us. They're aware of us. We're not able to sense them normally, at least. And so, because they're aware of us, we need to make sure that we're not offending them. You know what I mean? So it's not that they don't live
Mutual
somewhere
respect.
else. They live concurrently with us. It's just that
Yeah.
they happen to live. I mean, if you were talking in science fiction terms, you'd say they're interdimensional and they're living on an extra plane of exist or an extra dimension or whatever from us is how you'd say it. And potentially I often think that isn't it funny that alien abduction became alien abduction after we invented technology, but before that it was fairy abduction. You know what I mean? Where people were riding horses, and the aliens only got spaceships after we made spaceships. Really, you know what I mean? So, but if you look at the two things, they're quite similar in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? So, is it just that what we're seeing actually is that the how we perceive them is influenced by our own world at the time? You know what I mean? But that these things go back much further than that. You know what I mean? Because I've always thought, to be honest with you, the idea, I suppose, of meeting other intelligence to me, it makes far more sense that it's something that happens internally than you get into a small metal ship and actually literally
Yeah,
fly
but
for
there's
ten
a very
thousand
good,
years.
or there's a fairly strong argument that the local sort of plant medicine, the Liberty cap that grows naturally in and around the flora and fauna of these parts of Ireland
Yeah,
could
yeah,
essentially sort of facilitate a pathway through to you connecting with these. So whether it's brownies or fairies or selkies or elementals, like the conversations around these things are very real and very
yeah.
tangible, even though
Oh,
you
yeah, and
may
I mean,
necessarily have had experience of it yourself. And I'm not saying our guests will, straight away be able to
yeah, yeah,
tune in and have these kind of experiences, but there's so much documented evidence about them that there's maybe more truth to it than what people might dismiss, you
well, of
know?
course, it's a thing, I suppose, that I'm always. If you think we live in the moment where everything has been explained and thoroughly, think the chances of it are just infinitesimally small. Like, so why? Why would say everyone's getting it completely wrong all along, but now, bam, 2025, we've got it all right, we've it all figured out. So, like, if you look again, go look at when, according, like, if you look in the manuscript tradition in Ireland, they say the mounds are always open on Halloween. That's when that liminal space was at its most accessible. The mounds opened, the sheath, you know what I mean? That's where the word banshee comes from. So the sheath were open, and that's fine, right? So the mounds were open, which is basically saying access to the other world was there. Now, what else happens around Halloween? Going back to Liberty Caps. They don't grow in July. They come out
yeah.
around Halloween, you know what I mean? So now what you have is you have the sheaths open, the mounds open. So are we saying that literally physical beings are coming out of these mounds? Maybe not. But is it that what we consider tombs, and certainly people are being buried in there, but could they also serve a concurrent purpose of potentially being used as a place where psychedelics potentially are being ingested? And not, it doesn't even necessarily have to be Liberty Caps, of course. I mean, you dance for 12 or 15 hours, you can get yourself into a pretty altered state as well. Like, so I mean, certainly I would say
Even just
most.
through breath work and
Wait,
breathing, you
100%.
can
I mean, the
access
thing is,
altered states.
the
Yeah.
the onus is on the person to actually show me the cultures that don't try and find altered states of consciousness, because it's almost a universal
Mhm.
human experience where we try and find ways of altering our consciousness. You know what I mean, and altering our perception. It's you don't really find atheist societies. You don't really find societies that don't try and do this. So, as I say, at times in the modern West, we can kind of feel that the whole world is very scientific and very thing, but it's not really the case. You know what I mean? The vast majority of the world are still, they're very happy going to bed with concepts right and wrong, good and evil, angels, demons, whatever you want to call them. It's pretty there for a lot of people, and that liminality is central, to be honest with you, to Irish mythology and to
And the
how
subliminal.
yeah, yeah, 100%. As I say,
Yeah,
it's
it's a
the
sublime site. The whole site of Lough Gur is very much, it's got a unique and sublime magic to it. But all we can all we can do really is bring people there and encourage them to share in the shared experience of being there, maybe with some sound, with a bit of
yeah, yeah,
chanting, and with some stories from yourself. And
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And of course, I mean that's
I'm
only
so
the
looking forward to this myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
yeah.
can tell
I'm
you.
nearly tearing up listening to your
Yeah.
stories.
And I mean it's as I say, we're only scratching the surface here because I mean a lot of the stories are specific to the landscape and then, there's as I say, like, we would need hours, like, and it's
Yeah.
a thing that's so much more enjoyable and more natural to do actually in the landscape, and that's part of I mean, Ireland has a great storytelling tradition, like, so storytelling isn't really something to be done online in a Zoom call, like, it's something that needs to be done in person and
It's a
on
taste.
the landscape. It is. It's a taste, exactly. It's a, yeah, 100%.
D,
Perfectly surmised. Yeah.
before we take up any more of this man's time, have you got any final questions for Brian in and around what our guests can expect when they come to County Limerick and to Lough Gur?
Do I? I have no questions. You just blow me out of the water every time you start
Oh,
telling your
thanks.
stories. And our people are going to love that because you come at it from so many different angles. It's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I suppose I come from an academic background, but I'm not beholden to the academic process, and I would say I don't have an issue with, say, I have my own belief, my own spiritual belief, and that is not upset by an academic. I suppose I take an academic approach, but half of what I believe would obviously be massively castigated by the academics, but that's fine too, you know what I mean? So it's
You see dogs walking down roads
oh
and
yeah, but sure, I mean that's, I mean it's like very briefly, one time I was cycling down the road and just chatting in my head to myself, and I was saying, why doesn't God give me a sign? And I came over this small hill, and there was a kestrel who, for years, I kind of held as my totem animal. And there was a kestrel, maybe about 7 feet, not even 6 feet, maybe, hovering in the middle of the road. I had to duck to go underneath it, and I cycled past. And then I said to myself, well, at that stage, it's like he'll actually need to start giving me tsunamis. You know what I mean? As in,
I don't
you
think
ask for
it's
a
any
sign, you got
accident
it.
that you're the current sort of custodian and caretaker and in situ there. I don't think there's any accident about that at all. Like I say, I feel you're born for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of I mean, I suppose again, you don't want to feel as a kind of too arrogant about things, but it kind of fits here for me. You know what I mean?
for
The
it
now.
feels right.
the
Like,
synchronicities are there.
yeah, and I mean, it's I was gone for years. Like, there's a whole chain of events that even leads to me. I mean, it actually, to be honest with you, there's a whole chain of events, and it starts with me buying a bicycle, like that ends up with me being here today, and that's before we get into all the people who came
I
before
don't
me and the
doubt
things.
it.
But it is. I mean, there's a whole series of chances and coincidences. And even when we moved back to Lough Gur, so we were living up in Galway. So when we moved back, I mean, there's no housing here. Like, there's a housing crisis everywhere, but Lough Gur is incredibly bad. Within 4 weeks of us moving to Lough Gur, moving back to my mother's house in Bruff, I thought I'd be there for 6 months. We got a 240-year-old house,
Very good.
within.
Anya had a word with the locals, D.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was incredibly, again, if it was in a film, I'd say a bit cheesy, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? But it worked out. It's just one of those things. It worked out. And it does. I mean, the living in the landscape allows me to. I'm here pretty much every day. Like, I don't leave a whole lot, so I'm always here. I'm always walking the landscape. I'm always around it, and I have relationships with the old people here, like, and the people around me here, and like, they tell me incredible stories that, like, in theory, when you hear me, it doesn't sound like it should be happening in the 21st century. Like, and that's what I love. I love the old stories, but I love
Mm,
stuff that people who are alive have told me. And well, I've looked that person in the eye, they've told me what happened to them. And as I say, it's like the Banshee stuff.
yeah.
There's so many people have told me at this stage that it just feels like again, it's like someone saying they saw a buzzard. You know what I mean? It's just part of it. Like, and these are country people, like, they know what a fox sounds like, as
Yeah.
a few of them
Well,
have
I can
pointed
put
out
my
to me.
hand up and say, as a child, I heard a banshee.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Got the shite out of me, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but it is. I mean, it's a really common experience in Ireland that I think at times and what happens with me especially when I'm doing folklore based tours with people, and especially with older Irish groups and like retirement groups, and I'll tell stories, and then after an hour, whenever we finish 2 hours later, they'll all come up to me and they'll start telling me because they kind of realize that I'm not going to take the piss out of them, that
Yeah.
I'm on their side with this stuff, and then they all come out with things, you know what I mean? And as I say, it's mainly older people, but a lot of the most surreal and kind of odd stories I've been told about been people between 30 and 50, stuff that's happened to them late night in the roads and roads in the locality, like that, we've heard stuff about as children, and just crazy stuff. Like, and again,
Yeah.
normal everyday people, like not, as I say, a lot of very run of the mill, couple of guards, things like that, just not normal, like very average
I
people
don't
who've
know
had,
how significant this is, Brian, but I had an experience myself there only about 6 weeks ago, where I was driving back one evening and there was a storm that was so bad that there was a tree down in the road between sort of Carraig Aille and hospital.
yeah,
So I had to divert out towards Ballyneety. And I ended up driving around Lough Gur and the Stone Circle, literally on the roads was full of brush and debris from trees that were getting blown around the place in this storm. And it was quite extreme. And I was looking at it literally took me 2 hours to get back to Ballywire from Limerick. And I was crawling around, driving as slow as possible until I eventually found the old road between Bruff and Knocklong. Or was it
yes, yeah, yeah,
to hospital? And I eventually found my way home. But I remember certainly feeling quite a chill down my spine that if this car all of a sudden packs up or doesn't be working, I'm in a whole load of trouble because I'm out in the middle of nowhere on my own.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and I don't want that, and there's a real sense of a very humbling experience, just, to you don't want to be there when the elements are against you, you know?
yeah, and it's as I say now, with the snow there last week, like we were very much
Dee saw
we
me
were
when I got home. She could see I was
rattled,
shaking
yeah,
up.
yeah,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
shaking
but
up.
it can be that wildness, and that's actually something that, to be honest, in Ireland we constantly forget that most places don't have storms. I had an Israeli woman in the visitor center about a month ago, and she was talking about presumably the same storm, and she was just saying, like, she goes, that doesn't happen where I'm from, and she was like, so all of a sudden she said, I felt so small. She said, "'Cause I can just hear this it's elemental force all around the house,"
Thank
and
you.
she's saying, like, her partner, whatever, he's asleep, like, she's kind of going, how can you be sleeping through this? You know what I mean? Because she can just hear this, that sound of
Yeah,
that deep bellow of the wind. You know what I mean? It's just, I mean, that's yeah, I mean, Ireland's good that way. Like, it's a
it was
pretty
pure wild.
living. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, you kind of imagine then what it was like, back in the day when people were living far more out in the elements, like, you know what I mean?
With
And
no electricity, with
no
very,
electricity.
yeah, yeah,
But that again is the electricity in some ways is the scourge of. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to live without electricity, so I'm being
yeah,
hypocritical maybe. But like before the electricity, that's when the storytelling was at its strongest because
yeah,
that's what people
Cordy,
did,
yeah,
and the visiting in the evenings was there, and that's what I'm always saying to people when I get people who dismiss everything, and I'll say, sure, you've never been out once in your life at nighttime. You're an expert on what goes on at nighttime. And then they'll say, oh, I drove here and there. I said, but sure, your car is a cocoon. Like, you don't hear nothing in the car. So I'm saying, like, get out yourself. I mean, me and my wife were standing out in the road there about 3 or 4 nights ago. So bright here during a full moon, like you can walk down to the lake without a
Right.
torch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think a lot of city people appreciate how
mm,
different. I mean, I find even like we were all saying, myself and the wife, like we have a bad night's sleep during the full moon here. Like you can just,
yeah.
you know what I mean? You just, and it's like clockwork. It's it's the cycle of the moon, but you literally don't sleep as well. Like you know what I mean? And it's
Is
just
there a connection with Anya and the moon as well as the sun?
there. I think the sun one is stronger. Like, but there's some 19th century writings on it. See, Anya's funny because academically they haven't really looked at her a whole lot. So Rahali was the last one, as far as I can see, was really looked at her. But like she exists in pockets across the country, like you know what I mean. So, but around here she's especially strong, like, and it's there could be. I think the lunar stuff has been
Connection with fertility there as well.
yeah. Oh yeah, I mean she gives the the meadowsweet is a lovely little flower that grows there on riverbanks and lakesides, and she gives the smell to that according to tradition. You know what I mean? So again, a flower that blooms around the solstice, like so. And I can't find the source of it, but I do remember being told once that we have a holy well, St. Patrick's Well, and next to it you've Labafodrick, Patrick's Spade. But I was told once that when women got married back in the day, if they wanted to get pregnant, they just go on to Labafodrick in a full moon. Now, I don't think St. Patrick is a fertility saint, so
Yeah,
presumably, like a lot of the holy wells, they were just repurposed and
yeah,
updated. You know what I mean? I mean, to be honest with you, and I don't know, I mean, maybe people have done work on this, but my intuition is actually that one of the reasons that Mary, Our Lady, was so readily accessible in Catholicism was because she was just used as a kind of a replacement for the sovereignty land goddess who was already there. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
maternal goddess figure. So they just altered her. So Mary becomes, so Anya essentially becomes Mary. You know what I mean? The land goddess. Because I mean that dichotomy of, I mean, when I was growing up, like Mary was at least as important as God in the Christian thing. Like it was constantly, Mary was constantly being mentioned. Like she wasn't a side character, and that ties in with that idea, I suppose, of a sky father and earth mother that you have in a lot of the Indo-European tradition. I mean, that's again, Christianity isn't a monolith. Like so, the Christianity when it arrives, it's not like it arrives and everyone just as overall Christians now. So yeah, they become Christian, but if the traditions are still there in the 19th century, they have to follow through from the 18th, 17th, 16th, 15th, and
yeah.
14th. Presumably, like there's legal tracts in Ireland from 400 or 500 years after Christianity is has embedded itself in the country, where they're talking about not to be hanging around with druids and things like that. Now,
Okay.
if they're writing legal documents saying don't hang around with druids 500 years after Christianity arrives here, presumably there's some level of druidism still going on. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Presumably, other than that, they're doing some kind of weird red
Is
scare
it
where
fair
they're
to say that we would look upon, say, the pagans and the druids as the indigenous kind of wisdom and spirituality here?
yeah. I mean the like painfully will say so. What you have is like the mythological tradition in Ireland, which is one of the richest in Europe. Like that's written down mainly in the seventh and eighth century. It starts, so it's written by Christians. But like strangely, like when they do write it, like you wonder first and foremost why they write it at all. But they do write it down. You know what I mean? So, but those traditions, I mean, certainly appear to be harking back to where Christianity is in Ireland, like the Ulster cycle, the mythological cycle. Like these things are describing cultures that if they're not prehistoric, they're just after the cusp of the first century or whatever. But they're talking about stories. I mean, the Irish channels are brilliant because they're so specific. Like, they say like I don't know the number offhand, but Ireland was founded like 2749 BC or whatever. Like they give you down to the year, like you know what I mean? They have this whole explanation. Now there is a Christian element within it, like so they bring Noah's sons and stuff into it. Like, but that again is kind of inevitability. So really, what happens in Ireland is that Christianity comes, and then what you get is you get a melding of. So it's not quite Christian
Yeah.
anymore, and it's not quite pagan. It's somewhere in between, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why the holy wells work. So the holy wells are functioning as how would you say? Sorry, it's the dog again. The holy wells are functioning
It's
before
The
Christianity
black
arrives.
dog.
Then within Christianity, you have holy wells as well. So they just,
wait,
you know,
Gobinet's well.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's now Saint. You know what I mean? So it went from
yeah,
a
yeah,
god
yeah.
a saint. So it's like as if they just use the same name, slip it, and bring in the different culture around it.
Yeah.
Um,
I,
Anglicize it and
and
sanctify
sure, I
it,
mean, like
but
the
it's repurposed. Yeah.
the what you call it, yeah, and I mean the stuff was there around the good people and stuff. Like the church just can't it doesn't get rid of it. Like I mean,
yeah,
modernity does that, like to take it away as a kind of the day-to-day belief. But I mean, most of the old people around here, they're still blessing their house on May Eve.
yeah.
They're blessing the
And
four
we
corners of
will
the house
probably
to the
do it for
farm.
hundreds of years forward.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, I'm always fascinated because like we're doing it on May Eve, so we're doing it in Bealtaine, like so we
Hmm.
can pretend it's a Christian thing if we want. But it seems to me like that if we're doing it on May Eve, and what happens on May Eve? The good people are moving from their winter home to their summer home, so we're
Interesting.
blessing
Yeah.
the house. You know what I mean? These are painfully
I mean, I
things that
suppose.
they come back from much earlier. But I mean, it's like all the people I know who do it, they go to mass every week. Like,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't consider themselves pagan, but I mean, technically, what they're doing is heresy. Like, because what they're doing is definitely not.
Yeah.
sanctioned by the canonical Bible or whatever, or the
Yeah.
whatever's going on in Rome. But
Well, it's
it's
fair
just
to
kind of how it's
say
always.
the early sort of Christians, the Coptic churches of
Mm,
Ethiopia and ancient Egypt, and even the sort of Zoroastrianism that emerged into Armenia and
mm.
Iran, where it was like a monotheistic religion, and you literally had, say, God and the devil and the good and evil, and this spiritual battle is a far cry from the modern incarnation of Christianity that's here today. And there is a huge intertwining of the stories and the myths and legends. But one thing's for sure is that the land itself contains a kind of an innate wisdom that you can access through intuition when you come there.
100%. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that I suppose is, in some ways, I suppose there is a spirituality of the landscape that kind of transcends any one spiritual belief. So it doesn't really matter what point in time you access it, really, because it is always there. Like, so it's, yeah, I mean, there is a truth. I mean, to be honest, that stuff to me kind of seems a bit self-evident, really. Like, you know what I mean? That there is the land itself is, well, I mean, that's what Anya is. I say she is the landscape. You know what I mean? So really, I suppose it doesn't. You don't have to call it Anya or call her Anya. You know what I mean? There can be other names, but essentially, it's pointing at the same thing, regardless. So there's probably belief systems earlier than what we can even remember now that tie in with that as well. You know, because it's, I mean, the animism and shamanism that almost certainly had to precede the organized religion in Ireland. We know very little about it, you know what I mean? But we do know that in the Mesolithic, they're burying people. You know, there's some of the most complete Mesolithic burials in Ireland are in County Limerick as well. They're from 9,000 years ago. They look like they have grave markers, there's grave goods there. They've cremated these people to an incredibly high standard, which means it's just, so religious belief. And I mean, again, almost invariably, the guy was buried again next to a river. Like, so there's again, this is the thing. We can see the results of the belief, but we can't see the belief. But again, obviously, not obviously, but most likely these are, again, how would you say, they're shamanistic, animistic faiths, you know what I mean? And a lot of that really, as I say, like the good people to me is probably evidence of shamanism, you know what I mean? It's the last vestiges
An
of it, and over time.
indigenous kind of
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
pre
we know even,
pre-Irish or pre-Christian kind of brand of what you want to like.
well, I mean, we're all on this island a lot longer than Christianity. Like, there isn't a shift of, like, the population is set here in the Bronze Age, really. So we don't know exactly when Gaelic or Celtic culture arrives into Ireland. Genetically speaking, we're all here, like, already at that stage. The Ireland and Britain, by about 4,000 years ago, the population is already set in place, like, so everything that comes afterwards is their cultural shifts. But if the people have been in place for 4,000 years, and we know belief systems can transcend language and culture anyway, you know what I mean? I mean, Ireland has gone from being primarily an Irish speaking country to primarily an English speaking country, but it's not like the belief systems didn't pass over, you know what I mean? I mean, there's plenty of areas around here. I mean, this has been an English speaking area for, 130, 40 years now. Everyone around here still knows who the Banshee is. You know what I mean? She did just fine in English, you know what I mean? So stuff does cross through, and that's with the Anya stuff and the Sun as well. Like, where, as I say, it's very difficult to academically prove that the Stone Circle could be linked to Anya because you can't find a trail of actual, I was a written evidence, or well, obviously not written, but even archaeological evidence. But at the same time, you have a goddess around here who, and again, Palace Green isn't too far from here. Green is literally Sun Gaeilge, you know what I mean? And Anya and Green, there's links there too. So you have a stone circle that seems to be linked to the solar cycle. And then you have a goddess who seems to be linked to the solar cycle. You know what I mean? And you'd say maybe one and two are the same. So maybe originally what Lough Gur is about is the worship of Anya as the solar goddess. And over time she becomes the land goddess, or maybe it's two parts of her as well, because obviously we don't have the full picture of how people understood her. But and you can't, as I say, academically you'll never get a peer reviewed
Brian,
article out of it. But
to those who know, no explanation is
yeah,
necessary.
yeah.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I guess all that remains is for us to thank you for your time this evening. Is
Oh,
there
no
any,
bother at all.
before we let you go, is there anything else you'd like to share for the benefit of our guests on the tour, as to what they can expect from yourself and a day around the site at Lough Gur? I'd say they've got a fairly good idea already, Dee. What do you
Yeah.
reckon?
I don't think they have to come now.
Don't say that. Don't say that. I should have kept the best stuff. There's a lot of stories I haven't told. I didn't even get into Gerard Dearlay, you know. No, I mean, as I say, really what I feel is my job, again, without trying to sound too kind of conceited or whatever, is I'm really there to act as a guide. I know the landscape, I know the stories of the landscape, I know where the places are. And from there, my thing is to bring your guests around, let them experience it. And I mean, it's just, if I go somewhere I don't know, I love having someone local there to show me. And that's
Yeah.
really what it is because it's nothing to do with me knowing more or anything like that. It's just that I've literally just been here. I've spent years and years walking this land, so I know it. So it gives that person, I mean, if I could, if I could kind of shortcut to where I am now, if I could have all the notes I've written over the last 10 years now, I absolutely would. You know what I mean? So that's really what for me it's about. Like, it's just bringing people on the land and signposting things for them, and then because my thing is, it's the more people who experience the land, the better. And it's the same. Like, I mean, I'd love if there was 100 people doing research in Lough Gur, and I wouldn't care if I'm not getting the credit for it. I'd love the more people who come here, the more chance for insight there is. Quite simply, you know what I mean? If you put 1,000 people in the Stone Circle versus one person in the Stone Circle, the chances are with 1,000 people will find out more. You know what I mean? And as I say, I'm always deeply aware of the fact that as I say, I'm convinced like that people are constantly stumbling upon the real meaning of the circle there. And as I said, I'd say half the time they don't even say it. And it's there in their head. Like, so my thing is I always ask people what you think the stone circle is for.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I've heard most of the answers now, but every now and then someone says something I haven't heard before, and I say, wow, And like there's circles over in Bosnia apparently that were used for corralling cattle in some way. And you kind of go, I'd never heard of that. And then I looked up these circles and you go, wow, they look like him. You know what I mean? No, it's probably not the thing, but at the same time, it's, it makes me rethink. Then I'm saying, maybe there is a cattle link there. And there was a kind of a vague story of bulls being kept in the circle in the past. Like, it's a story I heard at some stage. I can't find it now anymore. But so, I mean, I'm kind of excited to bring people there because, selfishly, they might give something back to me too. You know what I mean? And it's the thing of it's a kind of a continually evolving process. You know what I mean? And my understanding of Lough Gur and the landscape is constantly changing too, you know what I mean? And it's and there has been a shift in the last few years, you know. I met a woman there I knew 20 years ago the other day and she was just amazing, but she just casually said, she said, "Oh, I just came down to talk to some trees." And
Yeah.
I said, "You know what?" I said, 5 years ago people wouldn't be so able to just casually say it, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I was just in class. And it was just like it was only after she was gone, I was just saying, that lovely. You know what I mean? That kind of that flip has happened that people can say things like that and it's not
Not
certifiable
get
anymore.
knocked up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it was genuinely, and it was at the time I didn't think of it like, because we just chatted away, like, because, I like
Yeah.
trees too. I was only thinking about it afterwards, and it's lovely that there's a moment where we are now, you know what I mean, where people
Mm.
Well,
are comfortable expressing things like that.
we're
Yeah.
gonna have Maxine with us on the day in Lough Gur, and then we're gonna have Brian of the Oaks with us the next day. So I'm absolutely looking forward to this already.
Me too. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, me too.
all that remains, I guess, is for us to thank you again for your time this evening, Brian, and for giving us an insight as to what to expect on the day that we're in and around the Lough Gur site.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No bother at all. It
Thank you,
was my
Brian. Have a good
time,
evening.
Verbe. You too.